Cedar Creek is one of the single most famous sites in the world of ecology for several reasons. We are the birthplace of modern ecosystem ecology, so research done back in the 1930s and 40s by Ray Lindemann and others really set the stage for ecology as we know it. So Cedar Creek has a long and illustrious history of being pioneers in the field. We've been very lucky to be part of the National Science Foundation's long-term ecological research network since it was started. Back in the early 1980s, we were one of the 11 original sites, and that kind of long-term funding makes it possible to start experiments that wouldn't be productive in the first year or two, but that are really important because the real world doesn't work in 1 and 2 year chunks.
Cedar Creek's a really unique location here because we do have all the major habitats and different habitats that you see in Minnesota and in the upper Midwest. We have these excellent savannas here, which we maintain by prescribed burning. We have prairies here, we have wetlands, we have the northern boreal forests, we have the great cedar swamps, we have the uplands dominated by all 4 different types of oaks. What really makes Cedar Creek unique is all these habitats and areas just all come together right here in East Bethel.
Here at Cedar Creek, we have 3 major experiments. Dave Tillman's Big Biodiversity Experiment, Dr. Peter Reich and Sarah Hobby's Biocon Experiment, and the new Forest and Biodiversity Experiment. We also have a long-running citizen science project looking at red-headed woodpeckers, as well as hundreds, literally hundreds, of other projects being conducted by graduate students and undergrads on site throughout the year. The first that kind of has put us on the map in recent years is Dr. Dave Tillman's research into biodiversity. It's an enormous field called the Big Biodiversity Experiment, where scientists manipulate the number of plants growing together in a plot. So there are 342 plots ranging from having 1 species living in monoculture all the way up to having 32 species and most numbers in between. Out in that experiment, we study things like the role of biodiversity in plant growth, in plant productivity, in soil health, in resistance to disturbances like drought or to human-imposed disturbances like pesticides. And it's a great opportunity to learn about the value of biodiversity and about the value of preserving kind of intact diversity in natural ecosystems.
My name is Callie Worm. I am a research coordinator here at Cedar Creek. So Biocon is it's a FACE experiment, free air CO2 exchange experiment that was started in 1997, and half of the plots receive increased CO2, half of the plots receive increased nitrogen, and then they are planted with different biodiversity levels, either 0, 1, 4, 9, or 16 species. So that was the start of the experiment, looking at these global change factors. And then in 2007, we actually added a drought experiment. So we are removing 40% of the rain throughout a given summer to kind of look at changes in precipitation. And then in 2012, we turned on the heat component. So we increase the ambient air temperature and the soil down to 1 meter by 3 degrees above whatever the ambient temperature is. Yeah, so Biocon is really important because it's one of the longest running FACE experiments. There were others in the world, but Biocon is the longest running prairie one, and we've increased all of these different factors, so like the warming and the drought and all of that stuff. So it's super important because we're looking at how all of these factors come together to create differences in biodiversity, and it's one of the only experiments that does that in the world. I hire interns from all over the U.S. and what I get to see is them coming together to kind of learn science together. So they're learning not only how to do research here and how big of an experiment Biocon actually is. They get to read about it in their textbook. They don't actually get to see it until they come here and realize how much work it is and realize kind of how cool it is. But then they also get to do their own independent research. So they get to learn the whole process and learn if they love to do research or if they want to to do something else, if they're excited about grad school. And then they basically make lifelong friendships here. I get to watch them develop, and I get to teach them how to have a job, and I get to see them move throughout their careers.
My name's Chris Bayersky. I'm a scientist at the U. I help manage the FAB experiment, which stands for Forest and Biodiversity. The FAB experiment in general is testing phylogenetic diversity and functional diversity. We have monocultures that are basically 4 small plots together, and diversity plots, which is 1 plot together. The monocultures are obviously 1 species, and the diversity are 2 species plots, 5 species plots, and 12 species plots. So we're testing the impact of species diversity on typically productivity and competition in general. Cedar Creek is truly unique in the sense that it has a couple different biomes that are very fascinating. The area itself, it's on kind of crappy soil. It's really sandy. It's pretty hard to grow here if you're a plant, but yet plants do. And it's really interesting to see how plants survive, how plants compete, and then the diversity that exists in the site alone, whether it's the prairie, the deciduous forest, or even some remnants of the boreal forest.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Candace, and we are both research technicians on the red-headed woodpecker recovery project. So the overall goal is to I guess we have about 5 goals. We're searching for nests, inactive nests and monitoring them. We're capturing adults and nestlings and doing like measurements on them and putting these radio transmitters on them to track their movements. And then we are like drawing blood samples and everything for DNA analyses in the future. And then we're banding the nestlings and tracking their movements after they leave the nest, immediately after they leave the nest, using radio telemetry, and identifying food sources.
Yep. It's kind of a neat place. It has all this oak savanna, which is critical habitat. And it's been a really great place as far as like all the science that goes on here and the opportunities we've had. The population here for us, for red-headed woodpeckers, is incredible. This is the most redheads I've ever seen in one place. So it's the perfect place to do this kind of work with this particular species.
So my name is Christy, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Minnesota, and I do most of my research at Cedar Creek. Cool. I'm very interested in biodiversity, so I work at an experiment that started 35 years ago about nitrogen addition. After 10 years of fertilization, they decided to stop fertilizing half of the plots to see if diversity would go back up on its own, or if we had maybe pushed the system into an alternative state with lower diversity. And it turns out, after 25 years of not fertilizing the plots, that diversity is still down. So my research is trying to see what is causing diversity to stay at these low levels, in the hopes that we can do something to either prevent it from happening in places that are experiencing nitrogen deposition, or to increase diversity in places that have lost it. The things that we take for granted now in ecology have been discoveries that have been made here, or that we have contributed to this knowledge. And I think it's nice to be able to learn about those concepts, but also to come here and be able to see it for yourself. That, yes, it says so in the textbook, but I can also see it with my eyes. I think that's really neat.
It's really a fantastic property, there's no doubt about it. Because of the outreach that we have here, because of the education, because of the people that work here, they're so passionate about this place. It really allows the community and the surrounding people and neighbors to bond with Cedar Creek, and by doing that they also take part ownership of Cedar Creek. And I think that really bodes in our favor and speaks well of the people that currently work here.
I highly encourage everyone who can to come visit Cedar Creek, because this is one of the few places in the world where you can actually come and see science taking place right before your eyes. It's a great place to understand the scientific process and to understand that at its root, science is about wonder and curiosity and discovery. There's a lot of places where science looks like what you would expect in a lab with lab coats and beakers. We have that here on the property, but we also have people going out and catching insects or measuring plant health or going and surveying for birds. And so coming to Cedar Creek gives you the opportunity to see the full range of things that science is and that science can be, and an opportunity to find your own science.